Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's Harmony Insights lunch date. My name is Erich Kurschat. I am the owner of Harmony Insights LLC, a company that allows me to work with organizations and consultants using the DISC personality assessment, much of which is done online these days, virtual assessment, and then also bringing teams together for workshops that can be done online if your teams are not yet returning to the workplace, or even if they have, maybe they're in different locations. We can do a lot of that online. I'm also the founder of HR Hot Seat, an inclusive mastermind community of, as we say, real HR pros solving real HR problems. We have over 2,600 members in the HR Hot Seat Mastermind, and they are in 10 different licensed chapters around the country. I'm especially excited to have somebody with us today who has been quite an inspiration to me in building the HR Hot Seat community. So if you want to learn more about HR Hot Seat, you can go to hrhotseat.com. Everything that we're doing these days is entirely free and entirely virtual to keep people safe. This is a Harmony Insights lunch date, something that I've been doing for a couple of months now to stay inspired. Go into the afternoon to do my best work. It's called a lunch date because it happens from 12 to 12:30 my local time. So it's right smack dab in the middle of my lunch hour. And then I can go into my afternoon just inspired to do my best work because of the connection that I've made. And I decided along the way, why not bring other people along for that conversation? And that's where you all come in. So I'm so grateful to you for being here today. My guest is Jennifer McClure, who's the CEO of Unbridled Talent LLC, but then also the CEO of the Disrupt HR community. And Jennifer, I am just thrilled to have you with us today. Thank you so much for being my lunch date.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so nice to see some familiar faces and names and to not eat alone for once, although I did eat before this, but it's
You are,
the thought that counts.
I believe you're an hour ahead of me, so your lunchtime is probably already come and gone.
It has.
I am thrilled to have Jennifer with us for a couple of reasons. Number one, she is just a fantastic speaker. I've experienced her sessions in a couple of conferences, including the National SHRM Conference, and just was so inspired by what she had to say and the room full of people that she drew. Just a lot of people showing up. But then also, Jennifer, you have been such an inspiration to me, as I alluded to earlier, in terms of what I've done with the HR Hot Seat community. You've spent time on the phone with me, we've exchanged emails, and you've been so generous, really with your time and with your input and with your feedback on things that I could do differently, making sure that you and I at all times are serving a common audience in very different ways. So right off the bat, I wanted to thank you for both of those things.
Well, you're welcome. We're helping to support communities just like you, and so there's nothing proprietary or something that needs to be kept to one's vest for that. Anybody that can, we can learn from each other and do it better, and that's what's important.
I love that spirit of collaboration over competition. I really appreciate that. I should say, this is also a special event today, a special lunch date, because it is being sponsored by Vaudeville. Vaudeville came forward. The HR director, Trisha Heisinger, came to me and said, you know what, I'm in HR, I'm not in marketing, but this is a great audience for us, and we particularly appreciate, she's a particularly big fan of yours, Jennifer, and so it was really important to Vaudeville to sponsor this lunch date today. So just a teaser that throughout our conversation and afterwards, anybody who posts on LinkedIn tagging Jennifer and myself and using the hashtag lunch date, if you want to tag Harmony Insights, Unbridled Talent, Disrupt HR, you're welcome to throw those in as well. But anybody who does that, we are going to be, or I'm going to be looking through those and choosing my favorite post, and Vaudeville is going to be donating or rewarding that person with a work from home kit that they that they have that includes, I believe, everything that you need to grow tomatoes, and then also some gummy candies. So just a really neat giveaway from Vaudeville. So I appreciate their sponsorship of this lunch date today.
Well, fun fact about vaudeville, since it is typically SHRM annual conference time, A few years ago, Vaudeville had cupcakes, the best cupcakes, at their booth at the Sherm Expo Hall. And they did that for 2 or 3 years in a row. And so when I would go in the Expo Hall Sunday night, I made a beeline for the Vaudeville booth. So if we are all able to meet again in 2021, Vaudeville team, let's bring the cupcakes back.
I love that. Well, thank you for adding that. I appreciate hearing it. And I'm sure they will as well. So, Jennifer, people know that I choose my guests and they choose the topics. None of this is scripted. Unlike some other interviews, I don't come into this with an agenda. You don't have a script that you're going off of. You don't even know what questions I'm going to throw at you, quite honestly. Um, you chose the title HR Leadership Personal Branding That Prevails. Why is this a topic, including anything about you and your background that you would like by way of introduction? Why is this a topic that is so near and dear to your heart these days?
Yeah, I think just, with my experience being, as an HR practitioner for almost 20 years, then a little stint in executive search. During that time, kind of was reaching out, helping senior leaders in career transition, kind of with their networking, their interviewing, and it was 2005, 6, 7 timeframe. So helping them to build their LinkedIn profiles. I really started seeing both from my own benefit as trying to build my brand, to build my business as an executive search consultant, what having a personal brand and being known for something meant. So again, I saw it personally because I was trying to build business, but I also saw it when I was trying to find candidates for my clients to fill their positions. You start the search with who do you know, and who do you know is often the people who are doing something. It's yeah, I mean, sure, it's relationship. I know this guy from high school or this girl from, the meeting that we both attend, but more often than not, who do you know is some function of this person's doing great work. They write a lot. They are active on social media, and I learned from them. So I saw how that was really impacting people's careers. And so when I started being invited to come into organizations to speak about what I was learning and teaching those executives around networking and personal branding, I started getting a lot of pushback from HR people in particular. Again, my people, the HR folks, are like, I don't need a personal brand. I'm the behind the scenes person. Or I heard a lot of, oh, I don't want to be out there on the internet because it's a security issue. I don't want people to know me. And it just was so frustrating because, again, I know from my own behavior and the behavior of the executives that I've worked with and still work with, when you're looking at a company or an opportunity, one of the first things you do in today's world, more so than even back then, um, you're going to go to LinkedIn. You're going to see who the leaders of the company are, who the executives are. You're going to look at who posted the job online, their LinkedIn profile, and you want to see, are these the type of people that I want to work with? So I think for HR leaders in particular, who are some of the most resistant over the years to building their own brand, sometimes again out of that, I think it's a false position to say I need to be behind the scenes. I really want to encourage you to embrace your position out front, which if the last 3 months have shown us anything, how important it is for HR leaders to be out front with both the COVID-19 issues as well as Black Lives Matters and all of the things that are going on in our world. HR has been pushed out front if they weren't there before. So we want both the leaders, the people in our organizations, and the people who are looking at our organizations on the outside to have an impression of a competent leader, of someone who is learning and growing. And I think that's what HR leadership and personal branding means to me. It's so important for both your own personal career objectives, but it's, I think, again, maybe similar to a CEO of an organization, your brand is so synonymous with the company that you work for, and both the quality of the people and the leaders that work there, as well as the culture. And so the HR leaders that are still taking a back seat and don't take active steps to develop that are hurting their careers and they're hurting their companies.
That's a great setup. And as you mentioned, people being pushed out front, I can't help but think, given the work that I do with communication and personality styles, that there are some people who are going to be very comfortable with that and take that on and be energized by it. And some other people who perhaps, like me and others on this call, who identify with being introverted in some way, maybe you're a little bit less comfortable pushed out into a more public light, into the spotlight. But then quite often that's where we end up doing our best work, even though it may be uncomfortable for me from the beginning. Once I'm there and I'm realized what I'm being called upon to do or to accomplish, maybe something fires up in me that had been dormant for a while, or that just the stars have aligned that this is the space for me to do my best work because I've been given the spotlight in a sense.
Yeah, and I think, as an executive coach or someone who works with leaders, sometimes I have to take a different stance depending on that person's personality or how they're positioning themselves. And so to that person who says, I'm really not an out front person. I'm really, I'm more behind the scenes. I'm introverted. I'd be like, hey, you joined the team. You took this spot. That's like, a person who's a professional basketball player joining the team and saying, I really don't want to pass. I just want to no, you're on the team. We need you to perform. And so part of your role as a leader, and I don't care if your title is HR assistant and it's your first job, or if you're the CHRO or some other, in between position, you are a leader. Because there are people, particularly in HR, again, everyone in the organization is looking to you for something, whether it's to answer their questions, to provide information, to help, again, establish the culture, to provide training and development, to make sure they get paid. All of those are leadership positions. So you don't have an option to say, I just want to be behind the scenes. Are there transactional roles in HR that maybe are more behind the scenes than others? Sure. But none of those people are on this call. Those are, those roles are necessary, but they're not here today. So I'm not talking to them. And to the people who are like you said, okay, well, how do I maybe step into that discomfort? Because I'm not saying it's not or that it's easy. I mean, I'm an introvert myself. So, I know exactly what it's like to challenge myself to pick up the phone and make a call to somebody that I don't know, or to go into a room where I'm going to have to meet people and network. All those things are stepping out of my comfort zone as well. But you made a great point. When somebody coined the great phrase, the circle with the little ball in the middle or outside, and it's like your comfort zone and where the magic happens. That couldn't be more true. And I think if you look back on your own career, your life, and you think, where were the periods where I grew the most? Where were the periods where I had the most impact? It's almost always when you challenged yourself to do something that you either didn't think you could do or you weren't really sure you wanted to do, but the results came from the growth that you achieved by doing that.
I've heard it said, anything worthwhile that's going to happen in life is going to happen just beyond the edge of your comfort zone. And I think that's a really powerful thought. I have to say, I appreciate we've gotten fairly far in our lunch dates without too many sports analogies, and you just threw one in, and I love that. That's fantastic.
I'm, if nothing, known for my sports analogies. They're just right on the tip of my tongue always.
Well, great. And you went with basketball too. And I recently watched the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. So that is fresh in my mind. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I need to watch that.
I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time before we end with actionable tips, talking about the challenges that people face on the topic of what we've chosen today, personal branding that prevails. I want to spend just a moment on the definition of branding or the perception of branding, because I would argue that is a potential challenge, that when people think of branding, some people fire back and say, that's such a marketing term. It doesn't paint sort of a meaningful picture of who I am or who I want to be or how I want to sell myself or position myself. What is it about the term branding that resonates with you that you think actually is beneficial when it comes to positioning ourselves as HR leaders or leaders in general?
Sure. I'm not married to the term personal branding. In fact, I wish I could come up with something that sounded better. But the reality is, whether it's branding in general or personal branding, you know what I mean when I'm talking about it. So branding is really about your perceptions, your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions. To use those sports analogies, when you think Nike, you think just do it. If you look at your own athletic wear, your athleisure wear in the closet, you have probably chosen a team. You're all Adidas, or you're all Nike, or maybe you're Reebok. I don't know who wears Reebok, or Umbra, but you've chosen a team for your sportswear because that brand, that logo makes you feel something or you project something, or it's just familiar. So all of that's branding. And so when we talk about people, I think there's no better, and I've used him as an example for years, and I'm blessed to have known Steve Brown, who was your guest, I guess, last week.
Yes.
He's here in Cincinnati with me. So I've been a fan of Steve Brown longer than most.
And you
But
probably get to have lunch with him more easily than most of us do as
I'm
well, because you're
actually
right in
going to
his
go.
neighborhood.
I'm going to go pick up a book tonight in person. So
Well,
with a
tell him we
mask,
all said hello.
I will. But I've used Steve as an example for years. It's back to that, kind of executive search example. When people say, who's the best HR person, in Cincinnati, or who's someone that I need to talk to about HR, or who do I need to get to know in order to understand HR people? The first person that comes to mind for all of those is Steve Brown to me. Why is that? Because Steve has a brand that is synonymous with his passion and his purpose around human resources. He shows that brand through many years ago, before it was even the thing to do, starting a local roundtable for HR professionals to come and talk about HR issues, not just with HR people, but people in job search and leaders in general. He started the HR Net to help HR leaders connect. He became active in his local, state, and national SHRM leadership. He writes on a blog. You think of Steve about HR because he's living it. His brand is part of who he is. And so that presents for Steve many opportunities. He's one of the best speakers I've ever heard. Again, not just as an HR speaker, but he's a very gifted speaker. If Steve wanted to quit his job, probably not today, because speaking's kind of I'd encourage him to wait a few months, but if he wanted to quit his job and become a professional speaker, that opportunity is available to him because he has a message that is unique to Steve and he has a brand. If he wanted to write a book, which, by the way, his second book is coming out soon, so please go to Amazon and pre-order it. I'm going to go pick up my copy tonight. And, maybe the second best thing in the book is going to be my foreword. So make sure you open up and you read that first.
Oh, wonderful. That's great.
But he's written books, he's invited to speak, he's made his way to the board of the professional association for his profession. All those things didn't happen because he was sitting back at his workplace saying, I'm not a brand, I don't want to market myself, I'm not a tube of toothpaste. He didn't think about that. He just said, I have a message, I am passionate about what I do, and he's out there and he's doing it and getting recognized for it. So if you're saying, I have a problem with the term branding or personal branding, or again, I'm not something to market on a shelf, I think that's an excuse.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, when you recruit, if you've ever recruited for somebody, how that process goes. Who do you know? Who's the best? And then when you're interviewing people, you're looking at their professional accomplishments, you're looking at what they've done. Are they sharing about their profession? Are they known as an expert in their profession? Are they involved in their professional association? All those things are aspects of branding. So just do it. Nike, just do it.
And we've spent some time talking about people who are speakers on stage, who have written books, blog posts. We've come up with some very actionable ways to make your branding known. So a somewhat philosophical question, and somebody has asked that, an attendee today, saying, if you don't consider yourself such an eloquent speaker, how funny I get caught up on that word. You don't consider yourself to be an eloquent speaker. Is branding, I'm assuming that branding is something that goes well beyond the stage and the blog and the book. When you sit down with Steve, or anybody else for that matter, are you expecting to experience that branding in a one-on-one conversation when somebody is outside of the public eye and off of the stage?
Yeah, I think branding also could be that you're known as someone who's a mentor. You're someone that other people look up to in your profession or in your community or your organization. Some of that may be that you volunteer or you're on boards, or how many CHROs or people in large organizations or even small organizations, the vast majority of them are not professional speakers. They're not writing a blog. They haven't written a book, but they've achieved a certain level in their profession where their brand is strong because they're associated with the pinnacle of the profession. They've achieved a certain level of position. And through that, they are probably active in their communities in some way. They're probably mentoring, whether it's internal to their organization or, maybe inviting some people in their community to sit under their leadership. There are plenty of ways to establish your brand without being on a stage or
Yeah.
writing a book or writing a blog. So again, think about, I challenge you to, if you want to go all out, do 10, but at least 5 people. And if you want to narrow it to the HR profession, who are 5 people you look up to? And then maybe go a little deeper and say, why do I look up to those people? And it's probably because you've learned something from them. They've helped you in some way, or maybe you don't even know them, but you have access to be aware of them or learn from them in some way. So there's so many ways to build a brand beyond creating content or speaking. And the vast majority of people out there are not doing those things. I think
Yeah.
it's a great way to do that. I think all of you have something to say. And so sharing on a blog or writing for your local professional association for their online blog or their resources that they share with members, volunteer to be on a committee, take a leadership position in your professional association, moderate a panel if you don't want to speak it, assemble a panel of experts and be the one that's kind of coordinating it. There's lots of ways to build your brand as someone who has expertise in your profession and as someone that people look to.
Yes, thank you. Those are all great tips. I'm suddenly thinking about how difficult it can be once you're out there because you're opening yourself up to criticism. And I had a great conversation with a woman that I've met recently, who's very active on LinkedIn, talking about a particular comment that was left on something that she had posted and how devastating it was to her. And we went back and forth about that for a while, and it brought to mind a quote, and I wish I could remember. If you know who said this, put it in the chat. But somebody saying, um, basically, the only way to not be criticized is to do nothing and say nothing and be nothing.
Yep.
But as soon as you put yourself out there to do good and to learn who you are and what you have to say, there are always going to be people that are not as supportive as they could be. I love how Kelly has chimed in saying that the branding could be defined as living your purpose through your actions. And that makes me think about what comes first. I can appreciate the introspective piece where we have to sit down and kind of get a sense of who we are and what our purpose is so that we can then translate into our actions. But I can also speak from firsthand experience that I've often gotten greater clarity on my purpose by looking at what I'm doing, by finding commonalities and through lines in the various things that I have chosen to do. I would love to say that by being introspective, I decided that part of my brand was going to be meaningful connection and productive conversation. But in reality, I looked at the various things that I was doing with HR Hot Seat and in other places in the language that I was choosing to use. And I thought, well, there really is kind of a through line here. And this is
Mhm.
now becoming my brand in a way that's kind of backward to how I would have expected, being someone who's naturally introspective and introverted. I thought it would have been that first. And trust me, there's been plenty of that. But I think a lot of my brand, speaking personally, has come from being observant about those things that I am choosing to do and that bring me fulfillment and reward in some very meaningful way. What are your thoughts on that?
I always think of, I've heard versions of it from other people, but the person that I credit it to is one of my mentors, Carrie Overbrunner. Carrie says, clarity comes through action. So if you're sitting around waiting for your purpose to land upon you, or reading books or consuming content in order to see what you think your purpose is, or to step into that, I think that's maybe that's successful for some people. But I like Carrie's approach. Clarity comes through action. It comes through taking steps. It comes through saying, I headed down this path. And in my own last 10 years of my career, I was just listening to a podcast interview that I did with somebody in February that he posted recently that I hadn't listened to yet. And I was like, I am brilliant. Now, beyond that, I talked about how, I said I'd been a spinning top over the last 10 years because I started out speaking not because I wanted to, but because people were asking me to, because of something that I was doing. I was using social media in recruiting. And so in 2009, 8, 9, 10, when I just kind of started speaking, people were like, Jennifer, come in and teach us how to use social media in recruiting. I'm like, oh, I'm not a social media consultant, and that's not really what I'm passionate about, but I'll go do that. I'll teach you what I know. Through doing that, I was like, what I really like is speaking. I really like talking to people. So through that action became some clarity. I started out my business where I'm going to do consulting, and I'm going to do speaking, and I'm going to do coaching. And after a couple of years, I was like, this consulting stuff sucks. I don't like the consulting, but I had to take action to get that clarity. So for those of us, and my purpose continues to evolve. I just, during this time, my speaking business went from very excited about 2020 to zero in about mid-March. Everything just like one by one, the dominoes fell. And so I'm sitting here going, I got time on my hands. I need to be continuing to grow though. And so I actually engaged a coach, a story brand coach, for those of you that may know Donald Miller's story brand process, which I've been through before, but I thought I've used coaches in the past who've helped me in multiple ways with both my career and as a leader and in masterminds. And I said, I'm going to practice what I preach, which is always to invest. And so I invested in a story brand coach because I feel like both personally and also because the world has changed, my own brand needs to be peaked and pivoted a little bit. I don't know, twiveted.
Someone coined that term. It's got to mean something.
I don't know what it means, but let's come up with it and hashtag brand.
Hashtag pivoted.
I think it is probably something with Twitter and pivoted, right? But I have to pivot a little. And so some of that's going to come again through taking my own advice, through action. I'm going to try some things. I'm going to refire my podcast back up. I'm going to start doing some more videos. I'm going to offer to be a guest on more podcasts, because me talking out sometimes my own ideas, to your point, Erich, sometimes that creates criticism. Sometimes that creates heat. And I'm watching and navigating what's going on in the world, where I'm making mistakes along with everyone else, and I'm trying to receive the constructive input that maybe is coming my way. I will always try to receive that in the future, because whether it's about some of the current topics that are out there that are a challenge to navigate, or just in general. Another thing, I credit T.D. Jakes, who I believe spoke at President Obama's first inauguration at the Washington Cathedral. Part of his talk there said something to the effect of, I believe, was, don't stand in the light if you can't take the heat. And that kind of hit me right between the eyes. And so I'll tie a bow on all this to say, you're in a leadership role in your organization, whether you have a leadership title or not. By being in the people profession, people are looking to you for leadership. So you have stepped into the light. There will be heat. And so what you need to do is to make sure that you are equipped to navigate the challenges, the criticism, both fair and unfair, that come your way with grace, that you learn where there's a learning opportunity, that you are able to put aside that's not helpful or not given in the spirit that it is helpful. But that you are constantly realizing that you have stepped into the light. There will be heat. And to your point, the only way not to receive the heat is to stay in the dark, to stay behind the scenes. And there are people that choose that, and God bless them. But again, they're not on this call.
So much of what you just said was quotable. As a reminder to people, we're going to be giving away a Vaudeville work from home kit, and we're going to be choosing among people who go to LinkedIn and use the hashtag lunch date, tag Jennifer and myself, Harmony Insights, Disrupt HR, Unbridled Talent if you want, but include a takeaway from today's conversation. We've gotten so many from Jennifer. This has been great.
And you can use twiveted if you want.
Hashtag twiveted, whatever that means. Come up with a definition. Use it as though you know what it means and that it means something already. That would be hilarious.
Use it with confidence.
Jennifer, people are going to want to follow up with you, learn more about what you're doing through Unbridled Talent, and of course, learn more about Disrupt HR's impressive presence around the world at this point. I'm blown away by it every time I think about what you've been able to accomplish through your extensive network and partners in Disrupt HR. How can people find you? What is the best place for people to get a hold of you online?
Sure, you can, all things Jennifer McClure at jennifermcclure.net. You can find me on LinkedIn at Jennifer McClure, on Twitter at Jennifer McClure, on Instagram if you like horses and cats and dogs and outdoors, which is part of my brand, and cupcakes, Jennifer_McClure. And if you'd like to be on my weekly letter that I send out, usually with something observational about what's going on in the world and maybe a story to kind of make it a point, jennifermcclure.net/prepare for impact, I believe, is the landing page. I should know
Great.
that. But if it's not, find me on one of those other places and tell me that you want to get that weekly letter.
As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to be following up with all attendees of today's lunch date via email with links to these things that Jennifer has mentioned, plus maybe some things that she hasn't that might be helpful in reinforcing the value of today's conversation. If you did enjoy it as much as I did, I'm certain you did. I don't even have to ask that question, although you're welcome to put it in the chat area. harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates will take you to a few more that are coming up. Tomorrow, I'm doing my third ever, what I'm calling a pop-up panel, where I choose panelists on the spot among volunteers tomorrow to speak on the topic of vulnerability. And so that's just a cool new take, if I do say so myself, on the traditional pop-up or a traditional panel conversation. Tuesday, having a conversation entitled The Pan-African View on Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion with a woman who lives in South Africa, who's been very active with SHRM, among other organizations. We're gonna have a great conversation about how she's viewing what's going on in the world now through the lens of somebody who is living in an area where apartheid was very much present along the way. And then probably a little bit of a silence until toward the end of July. And I just scheduled one titled Why Icebreakers Don't Work and How to Fix Them with the founder of a company called Plameo, and he is based in Australia. So instead of being at noon, this is going to be at 4 p.m. Central Time. It's going to be a late afternoon lunch date. No, a late afternoon snack date instead of a lunch date. So I'm looking forward to those. You can find those all at harmonyinsights.com/lunch dates. I'm going to encourage people, if you need to go about your day, to do so with our blessing and stay encouraged and healthy and all of those things. If you'd like to stick around, I'm going to encourage you to do so and unmute yourself to offer a thought or ask a question of Jennifer. In the meantime, Jennifer, thank you again so much. This really means a lot that you'd be willing to participate in this lunch date today. And I think Steve set you up well for it last week. You know, we talked about you a bit. We referenced you in our conversation. For you to now repay that favor, I think just reinforces that there are some really good people out there doing some really good things, building community and encouraging others, whether they're in the HR profession or not. And you land squarely in that bucket. So I really appreciate having you be a part of this.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today and to see so many smiling faces.